How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Nun Ches, Daf 58 of Masechta Menachos, friends. Daf 58, we discussed the prohibition against shirayim on the altar ramp. Of course, we had learned, I think yesterday and in the past, that shirayim of a korban, for example, korban chatas, that the emurim are burnt on the Mizbeach, the meat is meant to be eaten by the Kohanim. It is not meant to be burnt in the Mizbeach, right? Lo saktiru mimenu ishel Hashem. Anything that part of it, that the emurim were ishel Hashem, were burnt in the Mizbeach, lo saktiru. Don't burn the rest of the korban. Don't burn the meat. So, in addition to there being an isser of lo saktiru mimenu, of burning the meat on the Mizbeach, we're going to see about what about the kevesh? What about the ramp of the Mizbeach? We're going to see that there is a machlokas there. Burning bird chatas meat on the altar. Interesting question related to chatas ha'of that we will get to. And chametz and honey, minimum amounts and mixtures. Of course, the pasuk says, Ki chol seor v'chol devash. Lo saktir mimenu ishel Hashem. That pasuk where we learn about the shirayim specifically singles out seor and devash. Seor being chametz, devash being honey. Lo saktir mimenu, don't burn it on the Mizbeach. What are the minimum amounts of chametz and honey? And finally, when you have chametz and honey mixed together, how many times would you be chayav malchus? Friends, this is what we have to look forward to on Daf Nun Ches of Masechta Menachos. Let's get it. Friends, we begin on Daf Nun Zayin, Amid Beis, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines from the bottom. Itmari was stated on Ma'ile Mikulam Al Gabi HaKevesh. Okay, the last thing that we had discussed on yesterday's daf were things like, as I mentioned in the introduction, the meat of a korban chatas. You have a korban chatas, the emurim are burnt on the Mizbeach. Things like chelev would be burnt on the Mizbeach, and the meat would be eaten by the Kohanim. In Asham, a similar thing. The emurim are burnt on the Mizbeach, and the meat is eaten by the Kohanim. Shalmei tzibor, kachim kalim. We talked about the shtei alechem, the lechem aponim. So these are all things that, right, as I mentioned in the introduction, lo saktiru mimenu ishel Hashem, that if any part of them, or in the case of the shtei alechem, the lechem aponim, for example, even the bazichin or the kivsei atzeres are being burnt in the Mizbeach. So the leftovers, whether that's the meat of the chatas, oshim, kachim kalim, whether it's the shtei alechem, the lechem aponim, whatever we're referring to, they are not lo saktir b'menu. They are not allowed to be burnt in the Mizbeach. What about the kevesh? So Itmar was said, Hamayla mikulam, from all of these shirayims, Hamayla mikulam al gabi kevesh. Somebody who puts them not just on the top of the Mizbeach and burns them on top of the Mizbeach, but even placing them on the kevesh, on the ramp of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Chayiv, Rabbi Elazar Amar Potter. Says Rabbi Yechanan Chayiv, says Rabbi Elazar Potter. Rabbi Yechanan Amar Chayiv, says Rabbi Yechanan Chayiv, the Sanya that we learn in a Braise Mizbeach. Okay, friends, before we learn this Braise, I want to learn 2 psukim with you. Okay. These are psukim that we've been discussing already. At least one of them we've been discussing, and that is the pasuk that we just mentioned. And I'm going to read it. Okay, any mincha brought before the Rebbeinu Shalom, lo se'aseh chametz, cannot be chametz. Ki chol se'or v'chol devash, because any leaven, any chametz, any dvash, any honey, lo saktir mimenu ishel Hashem. So lo saktir, don't burn on the Mizbeach chametz, don't burn on the Mizbeach honey. Keep that. Remember, don't forget that. Don't burn on the Mizbeach chametz, don't burn on the Mizbeach honey. That's going to be very important on today's daf. Right? Those are the only 2 things singled out explicitly in the pasuk. Don't burn chametz, don't burn honey. And then, of course, the drasha of mimenu ishel Hashem, that mimenu ishel Hashem, any korban that the emurim, that part of it was burnt on the Mizbeach, or at least some kind of matir was burnt on the Mizbeach in the case of the shtei alechem, the lechem aponim. So then the shirayim, also, lo saktir mimenu, cannot be burnt on the Mizbeach. Givaldik. The next pasuk then says, Korban reishis takrivu osam lashem. Rather, don't burn them on the Mizbeach, but rather korban reishis takrivosam, offer them as a korban reishis. For example, seor, the shtei alechem. Shtei alechem is a korban reishis. Why? Because shtei alechem on Shavuos, the two chametz breads, are the first mincha of the year that are brought with the chadash wheat. Of course, most menachos are wheat flour. There's only two, if I recall correctly, examples of barley flour. That is the minchas ha'omer that we bring on the second day of Pesach, and the minchas knos, the minchas sota, are barley. Otherwise, all menachos are wheat flour. And the first wheat mincha of the year with the wheat of this year, of the new year, the chadash wheat, the first mincha with the new wheat of that year is the shtei halechem, is the shtei halechem on Shavuos. And therefore, right, korban reishis, so the seor, of course, shtei halechem is chametz. So, right, b'chol seor, b'chol davash l'saktir mimenu, ki chol seor b'chol davash l'saktir mimenu, korban reishis takrivosam ve'ela mizbeach lo yalu l'rech nichoach. Don't burn any seor, any chametz on the mizbeach. The mizbeach lo yalu. Don't burn any chametz on the mizbeach. But what you do is, shtei alechem, which is chametz, are offered as a mincha, but not on the mizbeach, but they're eaten by the kohanim on Shavuos. What else? What else is reishis? Reishis bikuri ad mascha. Bikurim. Bikurim include dates, date honey, devash. Kichol seor v'chol devash, chametz, honey are not burnt on the mizbeach, but they are korban reishis. They are offered as bikurim. They are offered as shtei alechem. Okay, fine. So the very next, so we have kichol seor v'chol devash lo saktir menu ishel Hashem. The very next pasuk is then rather korban reishis takdishu osam la Hashem. Rather, the shtei alechem, the bikurim are offered as korban reishis to the Rabban Shalom. The ela mizbeach, and to the mizbeach lo ya'alu, they don't go up even on the ramp. The way I understand it is lo ya'alu, even the ramp that goes up to the mizbeach, the kevesh, don't even put it on the kevesh l'reach nichoach for a givaldi shmek for the Rabban Shalom. Now, these two psukim are going to be the two psukim that we are working with right now. So in those two psukim, we have a whole bunch of different elements there. We have the seor, we have the devash, the chametz, the honey. We have mimenu ishel Hashem. We have the shirayim. We also have the korban reishis, which is a reference to the shtei alechem and the bikurim. We have el mizbeach lo yailu. Don't even go on the kevesh. So we have to figure out how all these different elements, the chametz, the honey, the shirayim, the kevesh, how the bikurim, the shtei alechem, how everything kind of works into these psukim and how they're darshaned, and this machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rab Eliezer. Now, Rabbi Yochanan almost says Rabbi Yochanan chayiv that any of these shirayim, placing them on the kevesh, you are chayiv for the sanya that we learn in the brayso mizbeach, that when the second pasuk says v'el mizbeach lo yailet, ein the el mizbeach, all I know is that they don't go on the mizbeach. Now the previous pasuk has said mimenu ishel Hashem, that any of these examples of shirayim, including like the meat of a chatas, ashram, etc. So mizbeach ein the el mizbeach kevesh minayin. How do I know? Even to include the ram, Talmud lomer be'el mizbeach lo yailu. They don't even go up to the mizbeach, if I understand correctly, on the ramp of the mizbeach. They don't even go up. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to say that ve'el mizbeach lo yailu l'reich nichoach refers to all of the things from the previous pasuk, including all of the shirayim. You're also not allowed to put them on the ramp. Rabbi Eliezer Omar Potter, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says when it comes to the shirayim Potter, because my time of the Omar Kol, the Potter says seor v'dvash, that the first pasuk had specified chametz, had specified honey, and then the very next pasuk says korban reishis, that when it comes to korban reishis, whether we're talking about the shtei alechem, whether we're talking about the bikurim, that the chametz, that the honey are not offered on right los aktirim menu, don't burn them, but rather offer them as shtei alechem, offer them as bikurim. takrivu osam, offer them osam hu derabi lecha kevesh kamizbeach avamidiach minalo. And it is about the korban rashis, it is about the seor, it is about the dvash, that it says Vela Mizbeach lo yailu, that they don't go even up on the kevesh of the Mizbeach. Osam, specifically them, specifically the Shtei Alechem, specifically the Bikurim, that is where there is a prohibition against the ramp. But the rest of the shirayim, like the meat of a chatas, osham, etc., the ramp is not included. Sure, lo saktiru mimenu ish el Hashem. Okay, don't burn them on top of the Mizbeach, but the ramp is specifically for the chametz and the honey, for the shtei alechem and for the bikurim, according to Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yechanan, hai esam mai ovid lei. What does Rabbi Yechanan do with osam, which Rabbi Elazar argues is limiting the ramp specifically to shtei alechem and bikurim? Mibayle, Rabbi Yechanan says that it is for lichtetanis b'linen abraise yachol yehei yachid misnadev umevi kayetze ba nidava. Is it possible, and we've seen this before, is it possible that a individual fellow, a regular guy, could offer a shtei alechem? Can a person just say, you know what, I'm going to donate a shtei alechem to the Beis HaMikdash? And we'll say, oh, okay, well, he said he's going to bring a shtei alechem korban. Well, motzis vasecha tishmar vasisa, you got to bring it now. Is that a possibility? You could donate a shtei alechem to the Beis HaMikdash. Talmud Omer korban reishis takrivu. Takrivu is plural, not individual. That the shtei alechem is offered as a korban tzibur, not as a korban yachid. Tzibur amayti lecha velo yachid. The congregation offers a shtei alechem. Individuals do not donate shtei alechems. Yachol lo yeh yachid maybe she'enu maybe chayvasoi kayetze ba aval yehei tzibur maybe she'maybe chayvasoi kayetze ba. Okay, we'll say fine. Maybe an individual cannot donate a shtei alechem, but maybe the tzibur, because after all, the tzibur does bring shtei alechem once a year on Shavuos. So maybe just like the congregation offers the shtei alechem once a year on Shavuos, maybe they can also donate shtei alechems. I understand an individual. Why would I think that an individual could bring a shtei alechem? You know, individuals never bring shtei alechem. Never says anywhere in the Torah that an individual should be bringing a shtei alechem. So you also can't donate a shtei alechem. No shtei alechem for individuals. However, the congregation does bring shtei alechem on Shavuos. So maybe they can donate shtei alechems throughout the year. Talmud Omer osam. So therefore it says osam, that specifically, so them and they are, right, so it says korban rashis takrivu osam, that they are offered as obligatory, right? So this korban rashis, which is shtei alechem, which is bikurim, they are offered, and rashis, I think Rashi says, is specifically a chova. There's no donations of rashises, I think. What does Rashi say? Majma delo ashkechon korban rashis nidava. There's no voluntary korban rashises. So these korbanis, certainly including shtei alechem, and imagine maybe bikurim as well, are only offered obligatorily, not voluntarily. Okay, so we're talking about the shtei alechem from seor and bikurim from devash. It's a little bit tricky to understand this line. I think there's also going to be another line or so that's going to be there's a few things I think on this stuff that are a little bit tricky to understand. Oh yeah, there was already. Anyways, fine. So the basically osam, according to Reb Yochanan, based on this brisa, is saying that shtei alechem can only be offered as an obligatory korban. It cannot be offered as a voluntary korban. So that is that. Shtei alechem are offered by the congregation once a year on Shavuos, and that is it. V'shtei alechem lo yikarbu nedava b'frek di Gemara. Is that really so? That shtei alechem cannot be offered as a nidava? That shtei alechem can never be offered voluntarily? But what about this? Batani, we learn in the Brisa, im nemar kol seor, lo menemar kol dvash, vim nemar kol dvash, lo menemar kol seor. We're going to learn a little bit later on the daf. We're going to learn, we're going to learn things out from kol seor and kol dvash. That you can even have a half a chametz, according to Rava at least. That we learn stuff out from, right? So seor is leaven, chametz, dvash is honey, and it says kol seor, kol dvash, to include even half a chametz of it. Now, why do I need to say kol seor and kol dvash? Maybe just say by one of them, kol. And since it says by one of them, we'll just like kol, which includes half a chametz, is by one of them. So the same would be applicable to the other one since they are juxtaposed. So again, im nemar kol seor, lema nemar kol dvash. If I already say kol seor, do I really need to say kol dvash? I guess just say dvash. Vim nemar kol dvash, lema nemar kol seor. If I have kol dvash, why do I need kol seor? Mipnei, the answer is sheyesh bisor mashein bidvash, v'yesh bidvash mashein bisor. The answer is that there are characteristics of seor that are unique to seor and don't apply to honey. And guess what? Honey also has its own unique characteristics that don't apply to seor, to chametz, to leaven. Seor hutar michlalo b'mikdash, that even though seor is, of course, lo saktir mimenu, is not offered on the Mizbeach, there is an exception. There is an exception where seor is, where chametz is offered on the Mizbeach. Dvash lo hutar michlalo b'mikdash, whereas honey is never offered on the Mizbeach. So there is something to seor that is not to dvash, that seor can be offered on the Mizbeach. There's an exception to that rule, where seor is offered on the Mizbeach. Masha enkein by dvash is never offered on the Mizbeach. Dvash hutar b'shirayim menachos, seor lo hutar b'shirayim menachos. And what is unique to honey is that when it comes to korban mincha, at least korban mincha is where there's a chametz, the rest of the mincha goes to the priests and they can enjoy their flour and water doughs. Now, as you can imagine, you might want to spice it up a bit. You can spice it up with honey. No, that's no problem. Even though you don't burn honey on the Mizbeach, you can eat shirayim mincha with honey. That could already be good. Get some nice gishmaka. Obviously, some of the honey in Eretz Yisrael is mind-blowingly delicious. And you get some of that, you add it to a little bit of carbs. I can imagine that could be tasty. Masha enkin chametz, you can't, as we learned the other day, lo se'afei chametz chelkom. Even parts of the mincha, even the shirayim, cannot be chametz. So the unique honey thingy is that honey can be eaten with shirayim mincha while they are not allowed to be chametzdik. Ha mipnei sheyesh b'seor mashein bidvash v'yesh bidvash mashein b'seor. Hutzach lomar kol seor v'hutzach lomar kol dvash. Okay. So we said that because seor has this unique angle to it and dvash has this unique angle to it, so therefore we have to say kol seor and kol dvash. Now, so we had explained what the unique angle to honey is, that it can be eaten with the shirayim mincha. We had said that the unique angle to chametz is that it's offered on the Mizbeach. When is chametz offered on the Mizbeach? Seor dehutu michlalo b'mikdash ma'niu. When is chametz offered on the Mizbeach? Lav shtei alechem dekarven adava. Are we not talking about when shtei alechem is offered as a voluntary offering? Rashi, right? So Rashi says, right, Lav shtei alechem dekarven adava b'mizbeach. And it seems like an interesting thing, but I guess the suggestion is that maybe you can offer the shtei alechem as a voluntary offering, that the shtei alechem could be offered as a voluntary offering, I guess a communal voluntary offering, and it would be burnt on the Mizbeach. That must be the exception. So you see, you could bring voluntary shtei alechem. No. So Amrim lo So Ram says, no, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos. There's no voluntary Shtei Alechems. The Shtei Alechem on Shavuos, but the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos is not offered on the Mizbeach. It's eaten by the Kohanim. Likar v'moim. Yeah, but the thing is that it's offered with the Kivsei Atzeres, and the Kivsei Atzeres, so Kilo the Shtei Alechem are offered with the Kivsei Atzeres, and the Kivsei Atzeres are burnt on the Mizbeach, and I guess therefore that makes it Ki'ilu the Shtei Alechem have some kind of association with the Mizbeach, Masha Ein Kain with honey. But Yachi, what do you mean? But I can make the same argument by honey. Bikurim Nami. If we're saying that honey is date honey, and dates are part of Bikurim, well, Bikurim are also offered with Korbanos. So let's say that just like Bikurim are offered with Korbanos, so they're also going on the Mizbeach to the same extent that the Shtei Alechem are, quote unquote, going on the Mizbeach. Disnam, we learn in the Mishnah Masechta Bikurim, Hagrizolos, Shalgabi Asalin, that when people would bring their first fruits to Yerushalayim, they would bring them in a basket, and attached to the basket were little birds, Torim or Bnei Yonah, young doves, turtle doves. Hayu Olos, they would be offered as Korban Olas. The Asalim Shibileim Nisunim L'Koyanim, and the baskets would be given to the priests. Interestingly, apparently, so the Girs in the Mishnayos is actually slightly different. It's actually, I'm about how to understand it, but we're going to go with the Girs that we have here. That the baskets are given to the Kohanim. So we see that there were these birds that were brought together with the Bikurim, and those birds were offered as Korbanos. So we see that there are Olas offered with the Bikurim. So let's say that the honey also has a angle, as a Mizbeach angle, in that there are Olas offered with the Bikurim, which includes honey, and the Olas are offered, right? Ola Sa'of is offered is burnt on the Mizbeach. So that should also be considered like the honey is burnt on the Mizbeach, just like the Shtei Alechem are considered like they're burnt on the Mizbeach when the Kivsei Atzeres are burnt on the Mizbeach. So Hanu La'ater Bikurim Udasu, no. It's different. The birds offered with the Bikurim are not obligatory. They're not like Ma'akiv the Bikurim. They're a kind of decoration. With your Bikurim, bring birds and they'll be offered as Olas, it'll be Mamash Gaval. But they don't need to be offered. What does Rashi say? Hanach ofis v'lav chovanenu. They're not an obligation. Masha Enkin Kivsei Atzeres. You have to. We saw Machlokas the other day. Reb Akiva, Reb Shimon. Who was it? Reb Shimon ben Anis maybe? Or Reb Shimon. Was it Reb Shimon ben Anis? I think so. What do you guys say? Reb Shimon ben Anis? What daf was that on? Let's see. Hurry up. 1, 2. Okay, forget it. All right. Was it? Bananas. Sorry. Okay. So whereas the Shtei Alechem, right? We learned all about it. Pashas Emor, Shtei Alechem, all the Korbanos, and the Kivsei Atzeres are offered with the Shtei Alechem. So the Kivsei Atzeres are mamish an obligation to offer with the Shtei Alechem. Masha'enkein, the birds by the Bikurim are more voluntary. Okay, fine. Givaldig. So that was Be'etzim, really, so what was that all about? That was really all about the Machlekes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar with regard to all of these other Korbanos, the shirayim going on the ramp of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan said that all of these Korbanos, well, let's actually start with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says that only Chametz and honey are usher to go on the ramp of the Mizbeach. That Isser would not apply to all of the other shirayim because it says Osam, them specifically. Rabbi Yochanan says no, Osam is talking about that there's no voluntary Shtei Alechems, but all of the shirayim are not allowed to go on the ramp of the Mizbeach. Friends, now we discuss burning bird chatas meat on the altar. Of course, chatas ha'of. There are two types of bird offerings. Ola Sa'of and Chatas Sa'of. Ola Sa'of is entirely burnt on the Mizbeach. Chatas Sa'of is entirely eaten by the Kohanim. None of it is burnt on the Mizbeach. So when it comes to Chatas Sa'of, none of it is burnt on the Mizbeach. So the shaila is, this whole concept of the shirayim, for example, by a regular Korban Chatas, so we had said, Ko mimenu ishel, right? Lo saktir mimenu ishel Hashem. Since by a Korban Chatas, the emurim are burnt on the Mizbeach, that's it, just the emurim, but the meat is eaten by the Kohanim, you're not allowed to burn it on the Mizbeach. But what's interesting about the Chatas Ha'of is that, yes, the meat is entirely eaten by the Kohanim. None of it goes on the Mizbeach. And therefore, so the shaila is, there isn't mimenu ishel Hashem, but there isn't any part of the chatas ha'of that goes on the Mizbeach, but there is all this meat that's eaten by the Kohanim. So what if you burn that meat on the Mizbeach? Is it a violation of lo saktiru, mimenu ishel Hashem, or not? Since no part of it's being burnt in the Mizbeach. But Rav Chome asks his father-in-law, asks his shver, Rav Chizde, I mean, I don't know if he was a shver at the time, but if a person burns the bosser of a chatas off in the Mizbeach, what happens? Do we say, look, the Isser is the Isser is when part of it, when the Emurim were burnt on the Mizbeach, so then the shirayim are not allowed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. But Vahai, ein mimenu la'ishim, by chatas ha'of, no part of it is burnt on the Mizbeach. And therefore, there would be no Isser. O dilma kol sheshmo korban. But, right, of course, as we saw, right, so what's the very first word of the next pasuk? Korban. Reishis takrivu. So maybe anything that's a korban, the Isser applies to. By nami shmo korban, and chatas ha'of is also a korban, so it would be Asr. Omar lei, Rav Chizda replies, kol sheshmo korban, by nami shmo korban. The answer is chatas ha'of is a korban, and therefore it's not allowed to be burnt. The meat is not allowed to be burnt in the Mizbeach. Kitanoi, and how to understand these psukim, right? This question that we just asked, we'll go weiter, is taka machlokes tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer kol shemimenu la'ishim. Here you go. It's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is that kol shemimenu la'ishim, that only when the meat is burned on the Mizbeach, right? Only when, the emurim are burnt on the Mizbeach, is there an Isser for the shirayim? Whereas Rabbi Akiva Omer, kol sheshmo korban. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says, like Rav Chizda had answered, that anything that is a korban, its meat would not be allowed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. So we see it's machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. My benai, what's the nafkamina between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? Well, obviously one nafkamina is what we just said. Rav Chizda, b'sar chatas ha'of yikabenayu. Says Rav Chizda, well, one nafkamina, of course, is the meat of a chatas ha'of. Rabbi Akiva, who says anything that's a korban would be also to burn its meat. So it's also according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that you would have, in order for it to be also, there would have to be some kind of emurim burnt on the Mizbeach. There's no emurim burnt on the Mizbeach here, so it would be patur. Rav Amar log shemen shometzora yikebenayu. Says Rav that the nafkamina is the log shemen shometzora. Similarly, the log shemen shel mitzora, the log shem, of course, the mitzora as part of his purification brings a korban asham. With the asham, he brings oil, and then the oil goes on his bahonis, on his ears, etc. So there, none of the oil is burnt on the Mizbeach, but it is considered a korban. So the shaila is, right, so the shirayim, now when it comes to the oil, whatever is left over from after the oil is put on his bahonis and on his ears or whatever, so the leftover oil goes to the Kohanim. So the shaila is, if that leftover oil is burnt in the Mizbeach, now what? Do we say that, well, it is technically considered a korban, right? Ditani Levi, that Levi teaches kol korbanim, that when the Rabban Shalom says that the Kohanim get all of the korbanim, l'rabbis log shemen shel mitzorah, to include the log of oil from the mitzorah, the leftovers that they get. So it is considered a korban, but none of it is burnt in the Mizbeach. So if you're Rabbi Eliezer, who says that in order for it to be aser, part of it would have to be burnt in the Mizbeach, and no part of the oil is supposed to be burnt in the Mizbeach, so there's no Isser of burning the shirayim in the Mizbeach. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says it's a korban, right, would say that, well, since it's a korban, it would be aser. Givaldig. Chametz and honey, minimum amounts and mixtures. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis thought, seor lo saktiru, that when it says don't burn any chametz on the Mizbeach, ein li ela kulo, all I know is all of it. Mikzasu minayin, how do I know about some of it? Talmud lomar kol, it says kol seor lo saktiru. Eruv minayin, and how do I know, okay, not just all of it, not just some of it, but even a mixture of it? Talmud lomar ki kol. My comment, what did we just say? Omer Abaye says Abaye hochi comment. This is what we just said. Seor lo saktiru, that when it says don't burn chametz on the Mizbeach, ein li ela kazayis. All I know is that if I burn a kazayas of chametz on the Mizbeach, that is osir. Chatzi zayis minayin. What about half a zayis? Tamlomer kol. It says kol seor, all leaven, even half a zayis of it. A ruva minayin. And what about even a mixture of chametz? That if you, right, so it's not straight up chametz. Maybe you have some chametz and it's mixed together with some non-chametz and you burn the mixture. Maybe that could be okay since it's not straight up chametz. It's a mixture of chametz. Talmud lo, right? It's a mixture that includes chametz in it. Talmud lomer ki kol, even to include a mixture. A mixture with chametz in it would also be osir. Rave Omar says, Rave Achikam, this is pshat, so'or lo saktir, when it says don't burn any chametz, ainli elo kometz. All I know is a full kometz of se'or is osir. Chatzi kometz minayin. How do I know even half a kometz, half a fistful of chametz is also osir? Talmud lomar kol, it says all. A ruva minayin. How do I know about a mixture? Talmud lomar ki kol givaldik. So even mixtures are also according to Rav as well. What's the machlokes between Abaye and Rav? Abaye is over yesh kometz pachos mishnei zeisim. So Abaye says, look, you can have a kometz that is less than 2 kizeisim, and therefore v'yesh aktara pchusim mikazayis, and you can have aktara less than a kazayis. So therefore, says Abaye that you can have so seor lo saktiru means do not burn a kometz of chametz. So elos aktiru means do not burn a kometz of chametz. Now that kometz can be less than 2 kazayases, right? And then when it says kol seor, it means even half of that, which would be less than a kazayas, right? If a full kometz is less than a kazayas, so then half of that would be. If a full kometz is less than 2 kazayis, half of that is going to be less than 1 kazayis, and still we're saying that it is asur, and less than a kazayis we're saying is still going to be asur, and it's not just when it is by itself, but even if it's part of a mixture, it will also be asur, less than a kazayis. Rava Omar, whereas Rava says ein kometz pachos mishnei zeisim, whereas Rava says no, a kometz is at least 2 kizaysim, which means that half a kometz is at least a kazayis. Ein kometz pachos mishnei zeisim. You don't have a kometz that's less than 2 kazayises. Ve'en aktara pchusim mikazayis, and you're not going to be burning anything less than a kazayis. So you have to. So when we're talking about burning chametz, we're talking about burning a kazayis of chametz. Now, what if you have less than a kazayis, but it's in a mixture with, right? So you have less than a kazayis of chametz, but it's in a mixture together with matzah. So we're saying that is also osir. So if you have less than a kazayis of chametz, but it's mixed together with matzah, and together, right, heter mitzvah for the isur, the matzah is being mixed together with the chametz, and now you have a kazayis, so you'll also be chayiv for that as well, according to Rav. According to Abaye, who doesn't require a kazayis, so you don't need a mixture to get to kazayis. We're saying even if it's less than a kazayis, but if it's in a mixture and it's not, or if it's more than a kazayis, whatever it is, the chiddush according to Abaye is that even though it's not pure chametz, you're still going to be osir. According to Rav, we're saying that if you have less than a kazayis of chametz, but it joins together with, right, so therefore you'd be part of the chametz, but it joins together with the matzah, so then if it's now a kazayis, you will be chayav, because heter mitzvah for the isur, and it will be a shiur of a kazayis. And finally, chametz and honey mixed together. What happens when you have a mixture of chametz and honey? What's the big chiddush here? The big chiddush is that we're saying that chametz is osir, honey is osir, chametz mixtures are osir, honey mixtures are osir. So when you have a chametz honey mixture, there's 4 things going on. There's chametz, there's honey, there's a chametz mixture, there's a honey mixture. Idmar was stated on Maila Misor Umi Dvash, if somebody burns a mixture of chametz and honey, al Mizbeach, al gabe Mizbeach, Omar Rava says, Rava Loka, he's going to be chayiv makis 4 times. Mishum Seor, V'loka Mishum Dvash, Loka Mishum Eruve Seor, Mishum Eruve Dvash. Rava says he's going to be chayiv makis 4 times. Ouch. You're going to be chayiv makis for seor, you're going to be chayiv makis for dvash, you're going to be chayiv makis for kol seor, and you're going to be chayiv makis for kol dvash. Ouch. Abaye, it says Abaye, ein loken al lav shebeklalis. Says Abaye, man, you need some good painkillers there. Sheesh. Wow. They're probably going to open up one of those. Wow, it's probably be a good business to sell right by the Beis Hamikdash painkillers for the people getting makis. What else would you need painkillers for in the Beis Hamikdash? I wonder. Abaye says Abaye, ein loken al lav shebeklolos. There's no makis when it comes to lav shebeklolos. You see, this is a lav that is kind of it's not. It's a inclusive lav, right? It says kol devash, which you're saying not only it's not just devash, but even mixtures of devash. Kol or not just chametz, but even mixtures of chametz. It's not kind of explicit what the lav is. It's kind of learnt out from kol. It's kind of included in. Right, kol dvash is including mixtures, kol seor is including mixtures, and there's no makis when it comes to these kind of inclusive lavs, these lavs that are learned out through a klal, through a general rule and general inclusion. A loken alav shebechlalos ikadami doesn't say chada miya lucky, bigdami chada nami lo lucky, dalo miyachid laive kilav de chasima. So one way to understand what this means is. Well, look, it clearly the pasuk clearly specifies chametz and clearly specifies honey. So Abaye is saying, look, you're gonna get makis for burning chametz. You can get makis for burning honey, right? That right according to this approach, that's for sure, right? You burnt chametz on the mizbeach, you burnt honey on the mizbeach. You are going to be chayiv makis for that, but you won't be chayiv makis for the mixture of each because that is learned out from kol seor, kol devash, from that kind of from the inclusion of kol. So Abaye says you'll be chayev double makis for seor and for devash, but not for the mixtures. The other way to understand is that after makis, right, it says right v'haya in bin akos harosho, etc. You'll give him makis, and then it says after that, right after that, it says lo sachsum shor bedisho. Don't muzzle an ox while it is threshing. I.e., right after makis, we give a simple, to the point example of a lav that you would be chayiv makis for. Lo sachsum shor bedisho. Don't muzzle an ox while it's threshing. Very, very clear. Chavre, is there any room for kind of like doubt of what lo sachsum shor bedisho is? Don't muzzle an ox while it's threshing. Pretty straightforward. This is not straightforward. Kol seor, kol devash. What is it? Right? Ki kol. What exactly are we coming to include over here? It's not clear like lo sachsum shor bedisho. And therefore the way that the second way to learn it is that the Torah in Parshas Kisei talks about makis and immediately then says lo sachsum shor bedisho. When are you chayiv makis? You chayiv makis on lavs. And lotas says that are super duper clear like lo sachsum shor bedisho. Kol seor and kol devash is not super clear like lo sachsum shor bedisho, and therefore I guess while you'll be nonetheless doing a mitzvah losa say, it's not a losa say you'll be chayiv makis for because it's not super clear like lo sachsum shor bedisho. So there's two ways to understand Abaye who says that there's no makis for lav shebeklolos. One is that there simply wouldn't be makis for the thing that is included for the mixtures, but there would still be makis for the seor, for the dvash. The other way to learn it is that no, bichlal, ki chol seor v'chol dvash is not a straightforward lav like lo sachsum shor bedisho, and makis only applies to straightforward lavs like lo sachsum shor bedisho, and therefore there's no makis bichlal by burning these mixtures. Okay. Interesting. So I think that would mean, Be'etzim, that according to Abaye, there bichlal is no makis at all when it comes to burning seor or devash on the mizbeach. I think even not in a mixture, because the lav of ki chol seor v'chol devash bichlal is not a straightforward lav like lo sachsum shor bedisho is. Very, very interesting. Friends, that was Daf Nun Ches, Daf 58 of Masechta Menachos. We learned at Daf 58 the prohibition against shirayim on the altar ramp, on the kevesh Mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan says all shirayim are also to be put on the ramp of the Mizbeach, whether we're talking about the meat of a chatas, osham, Chametz, kachim kalim, shtei alechem, you name it, whatever the shirayim are, they're not allowed to be put on the kevesh of the Mizbeach either, not just burnt on top of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Elazar says that no, the kevesh of the Mizbeach is also only for shtei alechem and bikurim, the korban reishis. What does it say? Korban reishis lo sakrivu. Oh, right. The korban reishis sakrivu osam Hashem Mizbeach lo yalu v'ech. That is specifically shtei alechem and bikurim. They're not allowed to be put on the kevesh Mizbeach, but the others, there is no isser. We discussed burning bird chatas, right? Chatas ha'of. If you burn the basar chatas ha'of on the Mizbeach, Rabbi Eliezer says that the isser of burning the shirayim is only when a murim were burnt on the Mizbeach. Here, by the chatas ha'of, there was no murim burnt on the Mizbeach, and therefore there's no isser of burning the meat on the Mizbeach. Rabbi Kiva says that it is about being a korban, and since the chatas ha'of is a korban, its meat cannot be burnt on the Mizbeach. We discussed chametz and honey, minimum amounts and mixtures. When it comes to minimum amounts, Abaye says even less than a kazayis is osur. Though we said you wouldn't necessarily be chayiv makas for it, but even less kazayis is osur. Rava says that there is a minimum of a kazayis. When it comes to mixtures, Abaye says that mixtures are osur, even though it's a mixture and it's not straight up chametz, it's in a mixture, it's still osur. Rava says that it's what it means that a mixture is osur is even though, right, he says there's a minimum amount of a kazayis, even if there's less than a kazayis, but then it's joined together with some matzah in order to make a kazayis, that will be osur as well. And finally, we discussed chametz and honey mixed together. Rava says you can be chayiv makis 4 times for honey, for chametz, for honey mixtures, and for chametz mixtures. Ouch. Abaye says, so there's 2 ways. So Abaye says, so you're not chayiv makis. So because it's a lav shebachlalos, it's a generalized lav. That it says ki, kol sa'or, etc. So option number 1 is you're not chayiv makis at all, because you only chayiv makis for things like lo sachsum shor b'disho. Don't muzzle a cow while it's threshing. Pretty straightforward. Here we had to learn things out. It's less straightforward, and it's kind of included in kol dvash, kol sa'or. So there's actually no makis at all. It's not straightforward enough. To be chayiv makis, it has to be like lo sachsum shor b'disho, straight up, no room for questioning. The other option is that Abaye says you're chayiv makis, of course, for chametz and for dvash and for honey, because it says those specifically in the pasuk, chol sa'or v'chol dvash, honey, chametz, you're going to be chayiv for that, just not for the mixtures, because those are learnt out from the klal. So friends, that was Daf Nun Ches, Daf 58 of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great, awesome, amazing day. Peace out.